So you just,
You chair at 7
all right.
o'clock.
So 7 p.m. it is, and here we are with a special planning advisory committee meeting for the town of St. Andrews, and we have our one item on the agenda, which is approving a right-of-way, private right-of-way for development of land as shown on the plan. And this is the so-called Victoria Terrace property. This, of course, is not a, as Paul has already pointed out to most of us who are here, is not a regular variance. It's actually a detail under the subdivision bylaw that requires us to approve such roadways and so on. So I'm just going to turn it right over to Mr. Gopin for his planning report.
Sorry,
right,
Mr.
thank
Chair,
you,
don't we
Miss-
have to approve the agenda, etc.?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Yes, it would be a good idea to do that. I'm just so eager.
You are,
yeah.
that's great.
So could I have a motion to approve the agenda, please?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and I see a seconder as Mr. Simmons. All those in favor of the motion signify by raising your hand. Okay, no contrary minded, so there we go. So any declarations of conflict of interest? Not hearing anything. Okay, so Mr. Gopin, over to you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and excellent vice chairing there, Jill. Good catch. I was going to go right into it. So this is maybe a slightly familiar file. I think this property was one of the first ones that PAC looked at, and it's I won't read the PID number, but it's on Victoria Terrace. It doesn't have any addresses yet, but you'll see on the map where it is, very close to Kingsbury Garden. I think there was a corporate name change of the owner. It's still the same person, but I think before it was maybe under a different corporate name. And this is, as the chair was saying, this is specifically about a private access, which has to do with the subdivision bylaw. And I think that's the first one of these types of things that most of you have seen, or maybe some of you have seen it in a while, although the vice chair, with her experience on PRAC, definitely saw a lot of these. So this is a 1.1 acre lot, currently zoned service residential, and it's staying that way.
Sorry,
the proposal is
Planner Gopin, do you have a
Yeah.
presentation? You can share your screen.
I've done this before.
Everybody's getting prompted tonight.
These
Yeah.
special meetings are not our thing.
Apparently not.
All right. That should be better, right? Cool. I think the last time I got all the way through the presentation. So I haven't gotten very far. Anyways, okay, so it's a 1.1 acre lot in the service residential zone. The proposal is to develop a subdivision with 4 duplexes and 2 single family dwellings. All of the buildings are proposed to be 1 story, and there's now a condition on it limiting them to that. And there's been some progress with the stopped up right of way to the south of the property. And the way that this all started was the developer approached the town and said, I noticed there's that piece of land there. If I had half of it, I could, do something there. And then the town figured out how that could be done, because it was sort of a unused piece of land, and now it can be transferred, split in half, and the southern part can be transferred to the owners on the south, and the developer can have the northern part. And with the variance on lot depth, he has enough space to carry out this development. And the ownership of that is, I believe it's with the town now. There's still some legal stuff that's happening in the background about getting it finally transferred. And we can't approve a final plan of subdivision until that happens, but the tentative plan can certainly move ahead. So just to remind you of the conditions that were placed on the variance that was granted in October. No development can occur contrary to the zoning bylaw until the subdivision process is complete and additional variances are approved if required. And probably the more substantial one is that buildings shall not exceed 1 story in height. And the reason that PAC is deciding on this is because the subdivision bylaw requires newly created lots to abut either a publicly owned street or such other access as may be approved by the PAC as being advisable for the development of land. And since this is not abutting, these will not be abutting a public street, we're looking at the PAC for your decision. So this is the zoning. And service residential, there's Kingsbury Gardens up there. And the reason I'm including this picture is not so much for the aerial. It's just to show that this is now a property. Just kind of to point out that is advancing. It hasn't quite gotten to the end yet, but getting closer in terms of that half, those different halves being assigned to their respective neighbors. And finally, the most important thing, this is the tentative plan of subdivision.
I'm in the middle.
And
of a
you
Zoom
can
meeting
see
right at the
here-
moment. You call back in about an hour. Okay, thanks a lot.
You can see here, this is the proposed right-of-way. It's 5.5 meters wide and it's 87 meters long. It doesn't have a cul-de-sac. Under 90 meters, I'll explain it. There's less requirements. And just something to notice here, which obviously will have to be fixed on the final plan of subdivision. Prince of Wales Street is spelled like the mammal whale that everyone goes to watch, not the place in the United Kingdom. So I kind of like that change, but should be correct. Okay, so PAC is really only being asked to approve the private access. The rest of the subdivision isn't really to be considered. This has already been considered in terms of a variance, and as well, council will be entering into a subdivision agreement with the developer. So there's opportunities for council to maybe add more terms and conditions there if they feel like it's necessary. So really, this is just about the private access. And the two important things to consider with private access approvals are convenient further subdividing of land. And basically, you don't want to landlock further properties and make it so that they cannot be developed. So if you think about, if you remember, I believe it was called the Belmax project off of Moat Drive. That was a particular, while it did have a right-of-way, in a lot of ways, the way other subdivisions had happened around it had kind of landlocked it and really made it incredibly challenging to develop. So those are the situations that you want to avoid when you allow private access. Because public streets, anybody can get from point A to point B, whereas private access, it's really only the occupants who are going to be using it. The other issue is public safety. And it's, you hope that there are never emergencies, but obviously there are. And for that reason, there are very strict standards in building code for private access is greater than 90 meters. They have to have cul-de-sacs, they have to, or have turnoffs at certain points. They have to be at least 6 meters wide. With under 90 meters, it's a lot. There's really not much that is required. Essentially, can a fire truck get in there? And we did consult with the fire chief, and he was not concerned with it. So basically, the idea is it's short enough that a truck could get in and back out if necessary. And if the fire chief is okay with that, I'm certainly fine with that. And I'll just go back to the map for a second just to talk about landlocking. And Frederick Street is, that portion of Frederick Street is not actually a street. It's in a very complicated legal situation, and really probably never will be a street. So essentially, there's no reason for the right of way to continue on to there. And because you're basically in the grid system of the plat, there's no other properties that are going to be affected by this right of way. It's really, it's a fairly simple one as far as these things go. And I'm sure you'll get to look at more complicated ones before too long. So I already mentioned this, the legal authority for this comes from the subdivision bylaw, and that's through the Community Planning Act, like pretty much everything we look at here. And because there's no public street, the private access has to be approved by the PAC. And I do have a recommendation, and that's given that this private access will not adversely affect further subdivision of land and that there are no public safety concerns, planning staff recommends PAC approve the private right-of-way for the development of land as shown on the tentative subdivision plan, and that the final plan must be stamped with a private right-of-way note. So that means it gets in the system, everybody knows it. There's no question down the line of whose street that is. So there's not a whole lot PAC can do at this point. It's not like a variance, it's not like terms and conditions. Basically, you can either approve the private access, go with staff's recommendation, or if PAC believes that there are issues with the right-of-way, then you can reject it. So that's where I'll leave it, and happy to answer any questions. Believe you're muted, Mr. Chair.
How did that happen?
When your phone
You're
calls
up.
me.
Mr. Ingles. you've been waiting.
Yeah, sorry, just one clarification. Why cannot Frederick Street be a public street? Why is it a private street that's gated?
It's not a private street. It was there's a long history to it, and it's basically there's different people who have claimed ownership of it, and the town isn't even one of them. So it's
Who maintains that street?
it's not maintained by anybody as far as I know.
So when
Kingsbury
it
Garden
snows,
plows
it
it.
doesn't, yeah, somebody has to
No.
plow it. Somebody has to, nobody
doesn't
plows
get-
it?
Doesn't
So-
get cleared, no.
This, I know that there's no address on that street. There's nothing abutting the street to access it. I just think those anomalies that we have in town really should be cleared up. Something like that has town infrastructure, because we have ditches along the side, so we have to go in there and maintain those, I would assume. We have to do work as the town, so we still have responsibility for those.
Yes, Mr. Nutter.
Through you, Chair, when it comes to access to infrastructure, we have usually right-of-ways or easements to which the town would have on properties to still access any infrastructure that we would need to repair. And that's usually put on the deed. So as the town, we don't have any issues when it comes to accessing the infrastructure services that provide to the town.
Okay, then, so then as a as a person of the town, can I walk up and down that street freely and do whatever I want as any other street in town?
Through you, your chair, the easement is actually for town work and town property. It is being disputed between some adjacent property owners for ownership of it. So the town does not have any vested interest in the property other than the easements to access the infrastructure to do the work.
I'll just have to tell you, Mr. Ingles, you're asking questions about a very, very complex situation, which has been going on for a long time. But I think the bottom line at this point is it is nothing that we can get involved in. we're not going to be able to make any disposition or recommendation or even advice on this, because as Mr. Knopper has pointed out, the town really has no vesting authority in the thing.
Then, okay, then to that point, could we not make this road connect all the way to the top of that, to go all the way through the property? So it's not a one-way, so it's not a dead-end street. The reason I'm asking this is that, to me, and I'll get off my soapbox after this, we shouldn't be, I don't feel we should be making private streets. We should not be really contemplating private streets within public town lands. Streets should be for the public use. There should be connectivity. This is not connecting to anything. You want to create neighborhoods, connectivity, active transportation. That's not achieving any of those goals with this design, unfortunately. And that's my issue with it. And I would like to see it hit Frederick Street and go down, and that way you have a new public street that has continuity.
Well, let's ask the question then, why a private access rather than a town-owned public access? Is there a reason that we can't do that?
I mean, first of all, there's no way that a public street, if public streets have to be 20 meters wide, so it would basically make it impossible to develop. You would lose a lot of, basically half of the development would be lost. And also that Frederick Street there is not a street. So there's private accesses make sense when you have a dead end, essentially, when you're running down, like if you think of Katie's Lane or O'Neill Farm Road, those are dead, those are natural dead ends where you have water. In this case, you have, through whatever reason, you have a, I almost want to call it a dead property, like it's just legally undevelopable. So even if you had private access going to there, the public still couldn't use it.
But if you look at the mapping that we have right now, you can see obviously that stopped up land to the south was supposed to continue the street to the right of the plan. You can see that clearly. That was supposed to go straight through, hit Friedrich and go down. And so this land is being developed into like 10 lots instead of maybe 4 lots, maybe 5 lots. I mean, that land that's being divided now between those two, between the subject property and the properties to the south, that would have been the road, that would have been the public street. And we're losing that.
Towns, that's already been disposed of. I mean, it's not a matter for discussion tonight.
Yep, okay.
Okay, anything else? All right, well, we've heard the planning report, you've heard the recommendation. There is a suggested motion on your sheet for this topic. Does anyone care to move that or some other form of motion?
You have Councillor Heenan.
I so move, Mr. Chair.
Okay, moved by Councillor Heenan. Is there a seconder?
I'll second that.
All right, I saw Kevin's or Mr. Simmons' hands first. Okay, is there any further discussion on this motion? If not, if you're ready for the question, all those in favor of the motion signify by raising your hand. I see 1, 2, 3, 4 hands. Okay. And Mr. Ingalls, I'm going to figure that you're casting a nay vote on this. Okay. Thank you. So the motion is passed. And that is that. Just before we head into adjournment, just wanted to bring up one quick idea that arises from this meeting in particular and why we're doing it in Zoom format. Actually, Mr. Knopper had contacted me to ask whether we wanted to do this live and or by Zoom. And I suggested that because of the one item and the fact that it wasn't likely to take too long, it would be just as easy to do it as a Zoom meeting. I had a conversation with Mr. Simmons here about this the next day, and yes, I did. Stop shaking your head. And my idea being that when we have these very brief kinds of meetings, rather than dragging everybody out, we should probably keep on doing them as Zoom meetings. And I just wanted to get the general perception of what you think of this idea, just for the ones that are likely to be quick and easy, like this one was, whether we should be doing them as Zoom rather than bringing people out to meet. Ms. Stewart.
I love it. I think it's very efficient and effective, but my concern, does it affect Mr. Knopper's ability to get proper notification so that citizens know where and how to participate? Does it impact that at all?
I think, if I'm correct, Mr. Knopper, your notifications would work on the same timing as whether they're in person or whether they're Zoom. I mean, it all follows the same timetable.
That's
The ad
correct, Your
hoc way
Chair.
that we, okay.
Yeah, so when we put out the notices, we put it as with the agenda package, we put it a front page notice, and that's the notice that the public would see and that we post out across social media as well as our website and on the boards outside of Town Hall here. So the public is aware of if it has to be a Zoom meeting or if it's in person. So a prime example of that is actually our regular council meeting that's happening this Monday night. Due to COVID situations, we were going to be in person, but we moved to Zoom. So I sent out a revised notice to the public saying it would be through Zoom. So if we had to do that, we have that ability.
As long as you're fine with all that, yeah.
Councillor
I'm in
Heenan.
favor.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I mean, we've been meeting since May, and this is the first time that we've had to have a special PAC meeting. I'm assuming this is out of the ordinary because this was very tentative on timing. I may be wrong on that, Mr. Knopper, but my assumption is that we will be month to month unless something pops up. Like this was an important thing and it was all timing. So therefore, I mean, normally it would wait till we have our meetings in the mid-month. It's just that I was to the understanding this was a special circumstance. So I mean, if it pops up again, I have no problem with Zoom at all, because if it's only one item, we shouldn't all have to drag in just to do one item. Thank you for allowing me to have the time.
Okay, good. Anybody else want to chime in on that?
Full support here.
Okay. So I think we'll operate then on that basis, and we'll see we'll just play it by ear, see how it goes. All right then.
Love it.
Okay, if there is nothing else, then I am going to declare this meeting adjourned. Well, not adjourned, terminated, I think is now the proper term. Boom.
Good night,
All right,
everybody.
thank you, everyone.